Is age difference a barrier in love? On a winter night, on a snowy, deserted road, young mechanic Jack encounters a woman much older than him. As he struggles with the weight of his anger, an unexpected helping hand reaches out. This meeting marks the beginning of a journey that will change the lives of these two broken souls forever. How will Jack's dark past and the mysterious woman, Beth, shape their future? Stay tuned to witness this heartfelt story. Jack leaned against the kitchen counter, his hands trembling. The words he had shouted at his friends still echoed in his ears. His eyes slowly dropped to the floor, haunted by the image of his friend's shocked and hurt expression. What had started as a simple argument just minutes ago had spiraled out of control when Jack lost his temper. The steam rising from the spot where the hot coffee mug had shattered still lingered in the air. Why does this keep happening? He thought to himself. Once his anger subsided, all that was left was regret and a deep sense of shame. Jack grew up in a troubled family. His childhood was filled with constant fights, disappointments, and a lack of love. However, one of the most vivid memories of his life was the day he earned his first paycheck. That day he made a promise to himself. He would be independent and he would never become like his father. This thought became a kind of guiding light for him. But life is always more complicated than the hopes of a young boy. The past is like a tree with roots deeply embedded. It's not easy to uproot and cast aside. Jack still carried the marks of bad decisions he made during his teenage years. He had struggled with controlling his anger, been misunderstood by those around him, and at times he was terrified by the thought that he might be turning into his father. He tried, oh how he tried. But sometimes the shadows of the past follow you, even on your brightest days. When Jack was a teenager, he started working right away to distance himself from his family. For the past 15 years, he'd worked various jobs and learned how to stand on his own 2 feet. Now, at 30, he decided to invest his savings into starting his own business. After much thought, he chose to do what he knew best: tire repair. From the places he had worked, he'd learned both the technical aspects of the job and the ins and outs of running a business. Now, armed with that knowledge, he was opening his own small shop. For Jack, this was one of the happiest days of his life. As he hung the sign for his shop, a sense of pride washed over him. But that happiness soon turned into a deep sadness. When he looked around, there was no one there to celebrate his success with. He didn't have a friend to share the opening of his shop, no one to sit down with for a cup of coffee and a chat. This loneliness made Jack angry because he realized something. Happiness only feels real when it's shared. And he had no one to share it with. He sat quietly for a while, lost in thought. He had tried seeking psychological help in the past. He had gone to public hospitals and asked doctors for support. But their time was limited, and they only prescribed him a few sedatives before sending him on his way. That kind of treatment wasn't enough for Jack. What he truly needed was help addressing the deeply rooted anger and loneliness he carried inside. He had considered getting help from a private clinic, but he'd never had the money for it. Every penny had gone towards saving for this shop. Now, sitting there in silence, he wondered, had he made a mistake? He had spent years working alone, sacrificing everything to save for the business he dreamed of. But now he realized that true happiness couldn't fully exist if there wasn't someone to share it with. Jack knew he needed to find a way to overcome his loneliness. He opened his computer and began searching for doctors. 4 hours he read articles, browsed reviews, and tried to find a specialist who seemed right for him. Eventually, he came across the name of a doctor known for their work and writings on anger management. While the doctor wasn't located very close to where Jack lived, their expertise and the positive feedback about their ability to connect with patients caught his attention. This felt like an opportunity. For the first time in a long while, Jack started to believe he could finally get the help he needed. He made his decision. Jack reached out to the doctor and went through the necessary steps to schedule an appointment. He hoped this decision would change his life. What Jack didn't know was that this decision was just the beginning. It would not only mark the start of an inner transformation but also lead him to one of the biggest surprises of his life. This journey wouldn't just be about self-discovery, it would also be the first step toward finding the love of his life. If this story moved you, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel. You can also support us with a super thanks. Thank you, and let's continue with the story. Jack closed his shop and got into his car on the day of his appointment. As he carefully drove down the snowy road, a car parked on the roadside caught his attention. Beside it stood a graceful woman in her 50s, examining a tire with her phone's flashlight. Jack decided to stop and check on her. Turning on his right blinker, he pulled over and rolled down his window. "Hi, need a hand?" he called out. The woman looked up with a warm smile. "I think my tire's flat," she said in a sweet and calm voice. The streaks of white in her hair gave her an air of elegance. Jack smiled back. "Well, you're in luck. I'm a tire specialist," he said. Her smile deepened. "But I'm on a tight schedule, so I'll have to work quickly," he added. She immediately stepped aside. "Of course, thank you so much," she said graciously. Jack grabbed a few tools from his car and walked back. "Do you have a spare tire?" he asked. The woman furrowed her brow slightly. "Oh, I'm not sure. This car belongs to my daughter." "Where would it be?" she replied, opening the trunk nervously. Jack chuckled softly as he peered inside. "Right here," he said, pulling out the spare tire. As he worked, Jack asked for her name. "Beth," she said with a gentle smile. "If you'd like, you can sit in my car to stay warm," he offered, handing her the keys. Beth thanked him and got into his car. Jack got to work but quickly realized the tire was stuck. No matter how hard he tried, it wouldn't budge. Frustration began to creep in, and he felt that familiar surge of anger rising within him. His ears started to ring. "It's just a tire. It's not that complicated," he muttered to himself. But this small setback was rapidly eroding his patience. Unable to contain his frustration, Jack stood up and kicked the tire hard. The metallic clang echoed across the snowy road, breaking the stillness. Beth, hearing the noise, cracked the door open. "Is everything okay?" she asked with concern. Jack, breathing heavily, responded, "The tire's stuck." Beth, her eyes filled with worry, slowly closed the door. The sound of the door shutting jolted Jack, and a wave of shame washed over him, replacing his anger. After a bit more effort, he finally managed to remove the tire and put on the spare. But as he worked, he couldn't stop muttering under his breath, "Why am I even going to that stupid doctor? I'm not going to change. This is just who I am." His harsh words carried to Beth, who sat quietly in Jack's car, watching him struggle. She could sense not just his anger but also the fragility buried beneath it. The new tire was securely in place. Jack let out a sigh, not of satisfaction but of sheer exhaustion from completing yet another task. Beth, aware of the tension in the air, stepped out of the car. Her voice was gentle but slightly hesitant as she said, "Thank you." Jack responded in a short, detached tone, "You're welcome. Sorry it took longer than expected. The tire was stuck." His cold, distant demeanor didn't go unnoticed by Beth. With a soft voice she replied, "I know you're in a rush, so I won't keep you any longer. How much do I owe you?" Jack, maintaining the same indifferent tone, said, "Oh, nothing. No charge. Safe travels." Without waiting for a response, he turned and headed for his car. Over his shoulder, he added, "My appointment's canceled anyway. You didn't take up my time." But Beth couldn't ignore his attitude. She sensed his exhaustion, his frustration, and something deeper, an unspoken sadness. She quickened her pace, catching up to him and lightly touching his arm. "Hey," she said, her voice calm yet firm. Jack stopped and turned to face her, surprised by her gesture. As he met her gaze, he saw an expression of understanding on her face that startled him. Beth continued, "Are you okay? I overheard you talking about a doctor. You don't seem well." Jack flinched at her words, a wave of embarrassment washing over him. Unsure of how to respond, he muttered, "I'm fine," but his voice came out harsher than he intended, edged with frustration. Beth, unfazed by his reaction, held her composure. She didn't see anger in Jack, she saw pain. Her hand remained on his arm, grounding him in a way he didn't expect. Jack glanced down at her hand, bewildered by the simple gesture. When he looked back at her face, her eyes seemed to pierce through the walls he had built. For a brief moment, Jack felt exposed, as if she could see the tangled mess of emotions he carried within him. Beth offered a gentle smile, her voice soft but resonant as she said, "You know, sometimes talking helps." Her words lingered in the air, finding their way into Jack's guarded heart. Her warmth and kindness left a quiet but undeniable mark on him, stirring something he hadn't felt in a long time. Jack realized that this was something he had never experienced before. For the first time, someone looked at him as though they truly understood. For the first time, someone wasn't judging, criticizing, or belittling him. For the first time, someone was genuinely trying to help. That realization brought years of suppressed emotions rushing to the surface, and 2 tears escaped down his cheeks without his consent. Beth could see how much Jack was struggling. She didn't just see a man filled with anger, she saw someone battling his own demons, someone trying to overcome them. In a soft, soothing voice she said, "Whatever you're going through, it'll pass." Her words touched something deep within Jack, a place he hadn't allowed anyone to reach in years. Beth stepped closer and gently wrapped her arms around him. In that moment, Jack felt as though some of the weight on his shoulders was finally being lifted. The pain, loneliness, and anger he had carried for so long seemed to ease, even if just for a fleeting moment. But this relief also awakened another feeling within him: vulnerability. Being so open and exposed to someone made Jack feel unsettled, as if it was a sign of weakness. Slowly, Jack stepped back, gently pulling away from Beth. His eyes were still damp, but his face now carried an expression of restraint, as if trying to contain his emotions. Quietly he said, "Safe travels," and turned away, walking quickly to his car. Beth didn't try to stop him. She stood still, watching as Jack drove off into the distance. Jack's mind was a whirlwind of emotions. Everything he had experienced that day felt heavier than he could handle. When he got home, he canceled his doctor's appointment. Sitting on the edge of his bed, he stared up at the ceiling, lost in thought. Beth's understanding words and her gentle embrace replayed in his mind over and over. Yet the fear of being so vulnerable clung to him, refusing to let go. Still, deep down, even if he couldn't see it yet, Beth's warmth and kindness had sparked something in Jack, a small, fragile crack in the walls he had built around himself. It was the beginning of a new chapter in his life, a turning point he was yet to fully comprehend. The next morning, Jack went to his shop with tired eyes. The sleepless hours he'd spent thinking about the previous night still weighed heavily on him. He tried to pull himself together by focusing on his work. As usual, he dealt with cars, checked tires, and helped a few customers. The shop was spotless and organized, and everything was running smoothly. The satisfaction of his customers gave Jack a small sense of relief. Taking a short break, he went to the counter, grabbed a cup of coffee, and took a sip as he stood by the window watching the falling snow. The gentle dance of the snowflakes momentarily calmed his mind. But then a car pulled up outside, catching his attention. Putting the cup down, he stood up and looked outside. His eyes widened in surprise. It was Beth. Jack quickly walked to the door, opened it, and asked in a slightly harsh tone, "What are you doing here?" Beth, with a playful smile on her face, said, "Is this how you greet all your customers?" She began walking slowly toward Jack. Caught off guard, Jack stammered, "No. I mean..." The words got stuck in his throat. Beth's warm smile seemed to reach right into him, as if she truly understood him. And yet, a voice inside him kept shouting, "Run." Beth, however, seemed unfazed by Jack's hesitation. She had clearly made up her mind to be there and wasn't planning to leave. "Aren't you going to invite me in?" she asked, her smile so bright it felt like it could stop time. Jack, trying to keep his composure, gestured toward the door and said, "Come in." But Beth responded with the same playful lightness, making Jack's serious demeanor clash with her carefree attitude. And somehow this contrast created an odd harmony between them. As she stepped inside, Beth pulled a candy out of her pocket, unwrapped one for herself, and then extended another to Jack. Acting as if everything was perfectly normal, she said cheerfully, "Here, try one. It's good." Jack shook his head slightly and said, "No thanks." His eyes stayed on Beth, but her relaxed manner only made the chaos inside him feel louder. Beth wandered around the shop, casually inspecting her surroundings while Jack stood frozen, unable to fully process what was happening. He couldn't figure out why she was here or what she wanted, but he also couldn't bring himself to stop her. Finally, Beth turned to him, her hands in her pockets, and said, "I smell good coffee in here. Would you mind making me a cup?" She asked as if they had known each other for years. Jack let out a quiet sigh and said, "All right," heading toward the kitchen. But inside, his thoughts were spinning. Why is she here? And why can't I say no to her? As soon as Jack brought the coffee, Beth got straight to the point. "Tell me about the doctor." Jack paused for a moment, but Beth's determined yet warm expression seemed to hypnotize him. Without realizing it, he spilled everything in one go. Words tumbled out as he spoke about his struggles with anger management, his past, and the battles he had faced. Beth listened attentively, her focus unwavering. Jack noticed that as she listened, her eyes seemed to drift as though she, too, was revisiting something from her own past. Taking a deep breath, Beth finally spoke, "We're going to that doctor. Do you have a lot to do today?" Jack, caught off guard, stammered, "I don't have any appointments." Beth locked her gaze on him and said firmly, "Then call. Tell them you're having a crisis and it's urgent. It's a private clinic, so a little lie won't hurt." Jack was stunned by her assertive and decisive attitude. Yet deep down he knew he couldn't say no to her. There was something about Beth that made it impossible to resist her influence. And truthfully, Jack felt that maybe she was right. He followed her instructions, made the call, and everything fell into place. That same day he went to the doctor. Beth waited outside during the entire appointment. When Jack emerged from the room, the relief on his face said it all. The session had helped, and for the first time in a long while, Jack felt lighter. Seeing his expression, Beth gave him a small, knowing smile and convinced him to attend regular sessions every week. With each session, Jack felt better. He realized he was gaining control over his emotions and learning to manage the anger that had gnawed at him for years. There was still a long road ahead, but for the first time he believed it was possible. Meanwhile, Beth found herself growing more attached to Jack with each passing day. She had seen the fragile side of this strong, troubled man and had become both a friend and a safe haven for him. Jack, too, came to understand that Beth was the first genuine connection he had ever had in his life. Her cheerful and easygoing nature had brought an unexpected light into his world. The age difference didn't matter to either of them. They were having a wonderful time together, laughing, getting to know each other, and without even realizing it, healing each other's wounds. This was a turning point in both their lives, and they both knew their bond would last a lifetime. Because this wasn't just a love story, it was a journey of healing, of two souls finding each other and becoming whole again. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video, leave a comment and subscribe to our channel. You can also support us with a super thanks. Thank you.